So, good afternoon all. Those of you who got a t-shirt, please feel free to take it. We do have more at the booth if you'd like one and you didn't get one earlier on. My name's Anthony Badger. I work for Axway and we are an integrated software platform which effectively enables businesses to communicate either through APIs or through file transfers externally and internally across the business in secure ways. I'm here today to talk to you about discovery, reusability and API productization, so actually making APIs into products that you can either cross-monetize in your business to stop the silos from struggling or to charge external third parties to consume your tools that you are building. I was supposed to be joined by my colleague David Luke, the imaginary man who's not here today. He was going to provide you a technical overview of this, and a few of you have dodged a bullet therefore by him not being here. So, appreciate the subject is quite broad, but just in case anyone isn't really aware of what an API is, it's an interface where people can go to and make an inquiry or request for some data. It goes away and queries the application and brings out the information. Consider it more like an ATM, a cash machine, where you put your card in, you put your PIN number in, and you say, I want to know my balance, or I want to take some cash out. That goes away and orchestrates all the things. So just in case anyone isn't aware what an API is. So, in financial services, the world has evolved quite a lot over the past 10 years, really, around opening up services, mostly through digital channels, through web and mobile, but also around enabling people who have maybe infirmities or disabilities or other ways to communicate with services to do better things. So open banking came along in about 2016. It had been around for a few years before. But the reason it's important is because it's not limited to the specification that UK open banking gives. It actually does much more. However, most businesses limit what they offer to the confinement of the specification. So in my view of the world, if I'm a customer of a service, I would like to go to a single place and consume all of the API information. Therefore, I don't know what an API is, but I would like to understand my financial status, whether I can have a loan, whether I can have a credit card, whether I can take a new product or service. And what I don't want to do is manually fill in new fields, new forms and new applications when you already have all of the data on my behalf. So this could be orchestrated within a business, or it could be consumed from a third-party service. So like a KYC check, a Know Your Customer check, could be run by Experian, but once that is first achieved by the bank on your behalf, the bank can then use that as a tool that they can cross-sell across their own applications internally within the bank, but also externally as well for other fintechs who maybe want to consume a KYC check that's already been pre-approved by a bank through Experian, as an example. So the limitations go quite broadly, but the problem is it typically falls on a developer. This is the blue persona here, to achieve all of this. And developers do exactly that. They develop code. And APIs have different specifications, different schemas, different standards. And a developer will do what it takes to make that API work. As developers leave, there then is legacy of these things that have been created that are not necessarily modern or fit for purpose, because the new developer has their own way of doing things. So in order to achieve a seamless goal, typically what happens is someone creates something to serve a singular purpose, not a group purpose. So within this, the problem lies within a developer community to achieve, but also they're the single point of failure for longevity of the service. So to enable all of this to happen, they need to be enabled, they need to be able to discover things that they already have access to that was previously created, and also then to do great things with those. The cloud there, by the way, is specifically supposed to reference cloud applications, but it's deliberately grey because the grey cloud sits over the developer's head. So I can tell what you're thinking of this slide, and it's wow. Now, whether it's a good wow or a bad wow, we won't ask. However, I actually love this slide. So so this is specifically from a bank perspective, but it could be any business. On the left-hand side, as I see it, this is the bank trying to establish a relationship with a customer, prospecting, marketing, content creation, trying to personalize why you would join them for this service. On the right-hand side, this is your existing customer base, the ones who've already achieved something, and this is the group I was talking about who then want to do more with what you offer. However, outside of the business, outside of the red dotted line, is all of the third-party services that need to be consumed to validate the service. There's things like KYC checks I mentioned, anti-money laundering, but it may be validation of citizen identity. It may be a non-UK resident who's relocated from France, as an example, who wants to do something with your business, but you can't prove or verify them. So in order to build this monolith, you need to orchestrate it and make it achievable. So at the very top are all the shiny things that you could offer. The way the customer comes in is through various channels, so you need to be able to offer this in a seamless way that enables business users and retail users to experience your service in a delightful way. But the reality is, when they're in this side, typically the bank or the service loses interest in them until they want to offer a new product. And it's when it comes to this side, it becomes difficult then to personalize that. So by being able to orchestrate that, the red dotted line around this is really the singular point of failure. So the developers create it, but then that's where you wrap around the service to enable things to happen. So although it's a very complex visual slide to look at, I actually think it tells quite a good story around how businesses operate. And then the challenge, the data is typically manually entered. So when you build a new service, new application, new thing, it's manually keyed. There's errors in that anyway, but also it's just a very cumbersome legacy process to do things. So how is this presented? Which persona typically owns this? It would be an API product manager. Many businesses don't have an API product manager. They have developers, they have people who build things. But the top kind of slide here where it says finding APIs is hard, reusing APIs is hard, these are true statements. These are things that will be challenged back to you if you ask a business to do better things. So by having multiple development teams, that's cost, time, and effort. By having multiple technologies, you are limited to the tool sets that you offer. And by having different security mechanisms, which might be constrained by specifications like UK Open Banking or the UK Pension Dashboard or any other open finance specification, you still need to enable all of those assets, all of those applications to present that data heterogeneously across the business. And ultimately, it's lack of visibility. It's very difficult to understand where your information is and what you can do with it. So the red dotted line that I mentioned on the slide before the last is ultimately where you should be aiming to achieve. The grey boxes at the bottom are your current infrastructure. They could be legacy, that's fine. But what you don't need to do is unpick everything that has gone before. You should be looking to put a wrapper around that service, which API enables legacy applications, flat file data, databases, into an enrichment service that can then enable businesses to consume things. Very top, it's you want the Amazon experience where it's instant, you want the Uber experience of transparency to where things are, Netflix hyper-personalization of service, and then ubiquitous kind of understanding of across all channels, all services, all devices, things are the same. So within the red box, these are API-enabled tools, but they don't need to be custom created. They are curated from the legacy underneath. So considerations for making it happen. This is a relatively self-explanatory slide, so you should be able to consume this as you wish to. So really think about what the impact it has on the business, but ultimately who the business serves, the users. So one of the vendors outside is talking about ethical debt management and social responsibilities, and I think that's a great initiative. So you can actually make better decisions on lending, on spending, on patterns of behavior by giving them the ability to understand their own financial wealth or lack of, and then allow them to make decisions that are interesting to them. On the same side, you might be a high net worth individual and you want to take advice from an IFA or somebody else. You want to externalize your data in a secure way to allow a trusted third party to you, but not to the bank, because the bank doesn't have any interest in that, to do things with you. And this could be the same in the pension dashboard. It could be the same in insurance. You might want to make a tailorized product based on information based on IoT devices. Is my car tracking my telemetry data? Do I need to report the speeds to get better insurance products? And it could be the same if there's an event in your house, like a break-in, that you can say, well, actually, it was just this room or just this broken pane of glass that needs replacing. So you can personalize that through the customer experience. Making it happen across the channels is difficult. And typically that's because legacy businesses or older businesses have very legacy processes. So you don't need to rebuild the entire world, and you don't need to be a fintech to achieve this. You could actually consume some of the fintech services to do this as well. But what you want to do is enable a seamless experience across all the channels. So you serve different user groups, you serve different people, and some of those people might have multiple products or services with you, so they should be treated the same across all of those applications. So from a product pitch perspective, this is where we sit. We're Amplify. We are Axway Amplify API Management, And therefore, we are effectively providing a proxy. For those who know what a proxy is, it's effectively a layer that sits across the business and then can API enable tools to speak common language and therefore present that common language upwardly to the business services that you provide, the front end. But underneath it, then, what your legacy stack is or what your modern stack is not particularly relevant to us. It is to you, but we can still consume all of that information and report that upwards into the various channels across the business. So when you start to scale the problem, so many businesses in here are not the Lloyds and HSBCs of the world, but I know there is some representation from those businesses here. When you look at things in group silos, it's typically seen that actually we only have a team of 2 people or 5 people or 10 people. When you look across a large business, what they don't realize is that that team is replicated many times over in various different geographies and regions, and API sprawl happens. So what that means is that you are effectively duplicating, repeating, creating competitive products to each other without understanding why. You're told to build these APIs, but you don't know what purpose it serves, or you do, but you're not then enabling it to be consumed in other regions because, again, of policy standards and protocols. So as this happens, the idea that we suggest is that you take stock of this, that you start to curate the information you have, the APIs you have, and create an asset catalog. Now, you're perfectly able to achieve this manually. However, it is difficult, especially as the services grow and as the teams grow. So things like document versioning, schemas, standards, protocols vary across regions. It is helpful if you understand how that is enabled in your business. We can help you with that, but you can also do that manually. It's effectively just a conversation with the teams and then start to catalog what that information is. So these, I think if you were to speak to your business and build a business case, these are the kind of buckets that you would look to in terms of where you are in your journey and where you need to get to. So on the left-hand side is the siloed business. So the cost reduction in solving a global challenge is the goal, is the driver. The second column is about improvement of experience for the developers. So how do you enable them to do things quicker, easier, more seamlessly? The third one is about doing more things. Now, as I mentioned, some of the open banking teams, if you work in a fintech, the CMA created the open banking process to enable competition to happen. The big banks were tasked to open up their infrastructure to enable the challenger banks to do more. At some point, there's going to be a point where that reaches, well, we're a big bank and we don't want to be consumed by fintechs anymore. We want to do more. So the third-party ecosystem is actually very important to large banks and to smaller businesses to consume service and tools that they are creating, which enable you to do better things. And then beyond that, what you could actually create is a marketplace. And a marketplace, if you consider well, a traditional marketplace, if you were to walk on a high street, you want to buy some goods or services, there is someone selling something that you want. A marketplace in API technology could be all the APIs that you've created, you've grouped together into an asset when you've curated them and when you've catalogued them. And you can say, well, actually, we can offer an IFA access to API data. The IFA doesn't care what this is. They can go to their singular dashboard, use my credentials that I've given to them via third-party authorization authentication mechanisms, and act on my behalf with my consent at a granular level to start looking at my wealth, my behavior, my patterns. But that's only interesting to an IFA. You could then do this for an insurance product. You could do it for a loan or a credit card or something else. So by allowing this to be built into a marketplace, you can charge externally to these third parties to consume it, but you can also cross-monetize that within your own business. So you can say, well, we've already built all these APIs. We've already got an internal marketplace. Just go and find the thing that you want. And if it's not there, put it together in a nice little product that you can then use for whatever use case you have in various regions. It could be that Hong Kong has a different open banking specification than Canada, than North America. So you can do what you want with the marketplace, and you can charge and make money from it externally, or you can save internal costs by doing it internally. So by opening everything up, it allows you then to have a composable, I think we'll refrain from the word no code because there's always code in these things, but ultimately you have to enable it to be quite seamless for developers to consume, so you make it friendly for consumers who are external developers. So with that in mind, What drives behavior? So if I am an external developer in a fintech, or I'm just a developer outside of your business, I would like to be able to come to your business and consume things. It's perfectly allowed, it's enabled. I want to do things that you have given me. So if we look at this persona, which is an application developer, it's the friction model. So yes, I can do something, but I am throttled, I am limited, I am restricted by what I can do because there's no trust of who I am, which is perfectly fine from a security model. But you should also incentivize these people to do better things. They can create tools for you, they can create new services for you, and in return, you benefit as a service. So there's lots of things that can be achieved through that process. So coming to the crux of what we're trying to achieve. So how do you discover it? So I mentioned creating a catalog. So this is our catalog, but there are others available. Ultimately, this is a place where you can start to standardize specifications, start to standardize how a developer creates APIs, how a developer knows what APIs already exist. So you discover, you curate, not create, and then you can build services from that. Now, when you get to the next stage, you enable a delightful experience for third-party consumers. So think of the world that I mentioned where you open everything up. Where would you go to if it's not a good experience? Would you go to the shinier website or the more legacy website? Would you go to the developer portal that makes it difficult for you to do business, or would you go to the easier one? So think about the people you are, I guess, serving or trying to appease, and see how you would experience what they experience, and if it's not good, change it. And then if you think about when you have that curated, how do you understand what these marketplaces tools could be, and really what's the purpose of the reuse then if it's not going to be valuable? So this gives you the opportunity to start to deprecate the services. It gives you the opportunity to start to make better decisions around spending on development. That's one of the big drivers as well, is actually cost reduction in duplication. But I think the one where it says treat internal APIs as products and consumers as customers, that is a valuable statement, or the most valuable statement. And the incentivization one is, it doesn't have to be monetary incentivization, it could be better experience for that perspective. So if you make it easier to find, it becomes easier to do things with. It's the if you build it, they will come type mentality. I don't actually agree with that. I think if you build it and it's easy to discover, it makes it easier to do things, but it doesn't mean that you will be the single source of truth for everybody to do things with. So what's the value in solving the problem? Mostly monetary driven. So you can save revenue in the business, you can charge your colleagues to do things, you can charge external people to do things, but you can actually just make better decisions. If you look at speed to market, which I think is one of the key drivers, when a developer starts to develop new code, it needs to go through validation checks. If the API has already been created somewhere else in the business, maybe they just need to configure that or enhance it slightly. There's a reduction in the API cost, and ultimately the decreased security risk. So as I understand it, in lots of businesses, APIs are created, but not all are published, which creates a risk to businesses in terms of governance around who does what and who has access to what, but ultimately what these APIs that are undiscovered are doing. So by putting security controls around that, and I think there are some vendors upstairs who are offering this type of technology, you are able to put a wrapper around this API management layer, which says, actually, we know exactly what's going on in our estate, we know how to solve the problem, and we know what we're doing with it. So if this was interesting, we have the ability to show you something at our demo. If it's not, that's fine. How does it fit? We can help you with a conversation with your business around, it might be interesting, but we're not entirely sure we're there on the same journey that you are. And ultimately that we can talk to your team on your behalf, or you can introduce us to the team. So the call to action really is, if this is interesting to you, where you are on your maturity journey. Some people will be in the legacy side, some people will be on the future-facing side. There are different points of the journey to enter, and therefore I think we are, as a vendor, well placed to help you with those conversations. So we've got some time, so I was told there'll be a Q&A if anyone has any questions. No? No question? Oh, question.
Thank you. I'm David from BlackRock. Quick question. So your platform, what does it offer in terms of the sort of general governance capabilities and introspection about what's underlying all the APIs in terms of data schema? And
yeah.
Does it actually?
So we can effectively provide agents that go and discover either published or unpublished APIs, and then we group them together and allow an introspection of those. So typically that's a business review or a technology review of, okay, well, we didn't know this was here, or we have 10 versions of the same thing. So then that's where we say, okay, well, we can now start to deprecate that list, and then you can start to put security controls around that. You can start to build the schema. You can start to standardize the future of these APIs. So once you know the version and the schema that it's on, you can continue to enhance that or make it conform to the more business user standard at that point.
Sorry, and then the platform itself offers a workflow for
Correct.
that.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a visual work through and workflow. So the catalog is curated in an asset that you can see, and then the next step is what would you like to do with it, and that's where you evolve into the productization, which is the final journey really. To be clear on all of this, by the way. It's not simple, it's not easy, it takes a long time. We've got customers like Commerzbank in Germany. It was a 5-year journey for them. Now, they are a very big bank, but they started off with, we don't know what we've got and we don't know where it is, and they'll happily speak about this now, but they've got through the evolution stage of now we can do amazing things with it. So, okay. Any other questions?
Do you work with other data solutions?
I didn't get a mic in this one.
Do you work with other data solutions? And the reason I ask is there's probably a danger that if you're using an API wrapper to API-enable legacy systems, then you're tightly coupling them into more modern front-end architecture. If you do that, then getting off legacy becomes much more challenging. If you put a kind of a floating data layer, a data lake, or whatever everyone's calling it these days, in the middle, you become more decoupled and you get more freedom to decommission those legacy platforms. How do you address that challenge?
Absolutely. So we are agnostic of technology, and that's a very salesy terminology for things. But ultimately, we're not dependent on any other technology. So we can work with Apogee, MuleSoft, any other API gateway, any other management. So we also offer API gateways and management capabilities. And the idea of that is it's opening everything up securely. So actually, yes, we are not dependent on the wrapper layer as such, but we are assuming at some point that the deprecation of technology will happen. However, in order to achieve compliance or structure to a common goal, you will then make decisions that actually this legacy application no longer serves the purpose that it was fit for purpose for, and then you decommission it. So yes, you're right, it can be a crutch maybe to we never need to remove this legacy application, but the idea is we're trying to get to the more modern way of thinking of things. So yes, good question.
I had a kind of technical question.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
He's not here.
Okay. But how much in terms of these APIs, because inside banking, well, basically compliance with policies is quite important.
Yeah.
And in particular, for instance, like privacy legislation requires you to use data in a particular way. Is there any support actively inside the API, or is this a manual task above for when you're composing things to say, well, I've got data over here where the person has consented to use the data for this purpose, and I have the service over here which will do the following things. Are they compatible? Is that something that's primitive in these protocols?
It's natively supported. So ultimately, you're asking the question is, if a specification or a standard requires certain levels of access, is that then, I guess, a global standard? It could be, but it doesn't have to be. So we can choose the journey. So when I talk about orchestration, I mean that we're this box and everything flows through us and then goes off on its various journeys. So if you give consent to a service under the GDPR, you are now free to invoke and revoke consent. But through the authorization layer, you can then give granular levels of access. So as a good example, and this is something I worked with Origo on the UK pension dashboard, is that they had this notion of little Alice and big Alice. So little Alice was just wanting to know what her pension was across the various pension applications she had. Big Alice wanted to do something with that pension, and that's a higher level of risk. It's what do you do when you've got access to everything. So yes, we can tailor the journey, and ultimately you might want to give access to, a good example is an IFA, right? You want the IFA to look at your data, independent financial advisor. But you don't want them to see everything. You might have a joint account with your wife, husband, partner, whoever. You only want them to see your behavior, your spending, your patterns. So you can choose granular levels of permissions, and it's down to you as a business offering that to allow the customer to cherry pick what that is, or you can actually mandate and say, look, if you want to give access to this, it's a carte blanche, access to everything, or you have to cherry pick. So the way I see it is there are standards and specifications. So OAuth 2 is more of a marketing consent. It's like, do you give permission to Facebook to access all of your contacts and everything else? And that's coarse-grained. And then the UK Pension Dashboard uses a protocol called UMA, which stands for User Managed Access, which enables it to be very fine-grained for you as the user to invoke, revoke consent at any time to the levels that you unfortunately, most of the UK citizen group, and this is a very wide sweeping statement, would not be educated enough to make those decisions, and that's down to education of what you can do with your data and who use it and who has access to it. I don't think that's really going to change because people will just give, yes, I give access, yes, I give access, but you can pick that granular level of access in the tool. Yeah. Okay.
I guess I'm just interested in terms of the reasoning that some of your clients have come to you, because one of the things that a lot of people are probably wrestling with at the moment is there's huge amounts of data within lots of different organizations, and how do you monetize that data? So I think one of the points you put up there was in terms of cost savings, but do you typically see people coming to you and saying, okay, can you sort of look at what we've got? How do we monetize that? Is that something that you can...
So we offer a form of business consultancy, I guess. We call it the Catalyst team. It really is designed to interview stakeholders in the business and say, what's impacting your business, how much is it costing you, have you got a view of what that is? And then we can help with kind of that. We're not a consultancy firm. To give you the full picture of everything, we started 20 years ago. We spun out of a company called Sopra Steria, who are a consultancy firm. Then the Sopra Banking was a different business which offers core banking technology. But we are an independent business, so we can offer advice, but we are not a paid-for service for consultancy. But the question around, do they come to us and ask us, we're hemorrhaging money, basically, what can we do? Yes, is the case. We have a couple of referenceable use cases which we could provide to you, not just limited to financial services, and I think this is interesting because energy and utilities is quite hot on this topic around how they sell and charge for gas and oil and wind. So we can provide that, and yeah, we have some banking-based customers that have that. But yeah, ultimately the marketplace is an evolving story. I think Lloyds and Royal Bank of Scotland, stroke NatWest, are the most advanced. Lloyds are a customer, but not for the marketplace in terms of their journey. But I think other businesses are now seeing a need to catch up, and it's not just based on cost saving. It's a comply and compete strategy. They want to smash through the roof of limitation, I guess. Okay. Any more? Yes.
Yeah, so for me, like in an ideal world, all API works, but if we put in a single platform, and how do you test all these APIs? And if it fails, like what is the point of contact for the developer to reach out to say, can you get this fixed, please?
Yeah, so when it's in the curation stage, I guess, or the creation stage, so it could be either, in our platform, and this is product specific then, so not generally speaking, we have, it's called Foundry, so the product name for it, and ultimately it's a place to go and test and expose the API securely and safely to see if it can be breached, I guess, but also what it scales to. Can it horizontally scale? Can it vertically scale? How does it cope with load and throughput, and ultimately any bugs and glitches? So that there is a visual workflow that enables you to test the journey of the API. Obviously, it's in a pre-production environment, so it's relatively safe from that perspective. It's down to you as a business to harden it, but yes, it's available within the product. Yeah.
Who to contact if it's not working?
If it's not working, in terms of if the software isn't working, or if the actual the API. Yeah, so well, it depends. So we are a software vendor. We provide the service as software only, so you can deploy it in your environment, and therefore you'd call our support. Or we can run it as a managed service for you, as a SaaS application, effectively, where we would be responsible for you making the request to build the API. So it would be our team who could build the API for you, given the specification that you give to us, or it could be a hybrid of that where we effectively host and run the service and you manage the front end, which is where the developer interaction happens. So it depends, I guess. So it would fall on us to do some of that, but ultimately, if it's specifically this API doesn't work, you can look into the code and then match it against other specifications to see what the bug fix could be or what the line of code is that needs to be adapted, would be my best answer. But yeah, there are a few different ways to answer that, but ultimately there is an introspection capability where you could analyze it against something else. Okay. Okay, I think that's everyone. You get 5 minutes back and you get your lunch.